Made in Ontario Environment Plan. It shows we do not need a carbon tax to fight climate change. Since 2005, Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions are down by 22%. With the Minister's Made in Ontario plan, we will meet our Paris Accord commitment for 30% reduction by 2030. We're leading the country in emission reductions and without a carbon tax. The federal government's new tax will drive up the cost of everything for everyone, including the most vulnerable. Minister Phillips is leading the fight against this unfair, unconstitutional carbon tax. As part of this fight, we have ensured that everybody will know the cost of this tax. We know the seniors living on fixed incomes will be hardest hit. We know it will cost the average family $648 more. It will cost our hospitals over $27 million by 2022. Here in Mississauga, the Trillium Health Partners will be paying $860,000 more by 2022. This means less money for frontline care. It will cost our colleges and universities $25 million every year. The University of Toronto and Mississauga will pay $440,000 more. Researchers at UTM are doing important work, including research that helps us better understand climate change, but even they will be punished by this federal tax. And of course, our police will be paying more. It's my honor now to introduce our Minister, Rod Phillips, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Rudy. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here on this beautiful, beautiful spring day. Rudy, thank you for the kind introduction. Rudy is doing just a fantastic job for his constituents out here in Mississauga Lakeshore, and I know Mr. Jones and I are very pleased to be here with him today at the Port Credit OPP detachment. Today we're here to discuss something that does impact everyone living in Ontario, including here in Mississauga Lakeshore, the federal carbon tax that came into effect on April the 1st. We know that the carbon tax is going to add to the costs to heat homes. We know that it's going to add to the cost to fill up your car, to fill up the trucks that deliver our food. We know that it's going to make it harder for businesses to stay open, particularly for small businesses to stay competitive. But what we don't know in total is all of the costs, all of the cumulative costs of Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. As Rudy mentioned, whether it's universities and colleges, retirement homes, hospitals, OPP stations, or other services that people rely on, vital public services, the cost of those services is going to increase because of Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. It's clear that the federal government did not consider this significant burden when they put their rules into place. And of course, we came into office in June with a number of important promises, but one of them was that we were going to use every tool in our power to fight against this carbon tax. And we were going to make it very clear to Ontarians the cost of that tax. Now, we also made it clear that we were going to bring in a plan that would reflect the values of Ontarians when it comes to protecting the environment. And back in November, I brought in my Made in Ontario Environment Plan. Among the 53-page plan was our commitments related to climate change, and Rudy touched on a number of those. We have committed to achieve the targets that were established by the Prime Minister to hit the 30% reduction over 2005 levels in GHG emissions. And Ontario, as I've mentioned numerous times and Rudy mentioned, is well on track to achieve that target. The most recent results just came out yesterday from the National Inventory Report, which is the official report that's used by the province, by the federal government, to measure emissions. And that report came out yesterday, and it indicated that, again, Ontario is on track. We are now just over 22% in terms of our reductions in emissions towards that target, almost 75% of the way there. And as I pointed out, our Made in Ontario plan has specific pragmatic steps that will get us to the 30% total by 2030. Interestingly, yesterday, what also became public was that although previously, while Ontario had reduced emissions by 22% and the rest of Canada had increased emissions in the same period by 3%, the new numbers tell us that while Ontario has continued to reduce emissions, the rest of Canada has increased emissions by 6%. So again, as Ontario continues to do its share, the federal government's plans and the federal government's approaches to climate does not assist in them even achieving their own targets. This makes it clear that our plan and that the approach that we're taking, the approach that Ontarians are taking, and the approach that Ontarians have invested in is the right plan. And it does not, as I've said many times, include a carbon tax. We are going to use all the tools at our disposal to make sure that we educate Ontarians and talk to them about our plan, that they understand what's involved and what we're committed to, but that we also have them understand the costs that are going to be coming their way, whether those costs are on fuel at the fuel pump, whether those costs are in their home, or whether those costs are to vital, important institutions like the OPP. And with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to my colleague, Sylvia Jones, the Solicitor General of Ontario. Sylvia?
Thank you so much, Rod. You know, the federal carbon tax will drain resources of the essential security and community safety services of the people of Ontario that rely on it, including police, local fire departments, and our corrections, probation, and parole system. Funds that would typically go towards keeping your family safe here at the Port Credit OPP detachment and across Ontario will instead be spent paying for the carbon tax, which, as Minister Phillips points out, doesn't even protect the environment. Just one example of how the federal carbon tax will drain the resources of our community safety services is in heating costs. Ontario's adult correction facilities and OPP detachments will pay an extra $1.4 million by 2022 for annual heating. This is hard-earned taxpayers' money that could have been used to keep our families safe, stand up for victims, and hold criminals accountable for their actions. Here's another example. The OPP relies on more than 4,000 vehicles to fulfill their duties, police cars to keep our streets safe, aircraft to find missing people, and even snowmobiles and ATVs to patrol rural and northern Ontario. The carbon tax will cost this fleet more than an additional $2 million annually by 2022. So with just these two line examples, heat and fuel for the OPP, we're talking about $3.4 million into the pockets of Justin Trudeau's government instead of vital public service initiatives. That's nearly 24,000 life-saving naloxone kits, 6,300 bulletproof vests that protect our officers on the front line, or 98 drug testing devices to keep our roads safe. Including the additional HST costs, the carbon tax will increase the price of gasoline in Ontario by 5 cents per litre every time a police cruiser, fire truck, or ambulance fills up their tank. And this is only the beginning. The federal carbon tax will increase the price of gasoline by 11.1 cents in the next 3 years. The federal carbon tax has devastating impacts on every single community, every single fire department, and every single police service. This is money that could be used to buy protective gear for firefighters, hire more correctional staff, or invest in the fight against human and labor trafficking. Yet the federal Liberals insist on imposing this tax, regardless of how ineffective it may be. That is why we are committed to using every tool at our disposal, including the courts, to challenge the federal government's unconstitutional carbon tax. We have released our own plan, which demonstrates that provinces are capable of managing their greenhouse gas emissions without the federal government putting the security of people at risk. And we will continue to fight against this unconstitutional tax, stand up for the people of Ontario, and implement effective and affordable solutions to preserve and protect our environment and the people. Thank you.
Yeah, Minister, it's for Minister Jones, actually. Okay. Minister, last Friday, the people in Hamilton were shocked to discover that to learn that there had been 2 overdose deaths within 12 hours in the Hamilton Wentworth Detention Centre. There's been a slew of things done to try and prevent drugs from entering the institutions, but should people just accept that people are going to die from overdoses in jails, that there's nothing more you can do?
No, we should never accept that those tragedies need to occur or should be occurring. You know, this is a province-wide, community-wide issue. That's frankly why our government has made such a commitment to mental health and addictions, and it includes working with the Ministry of Health in our communities, making sure in our corrections facilities that contraband does not end up in the prisons. We have done some concrete things, but it speaks to the fact that we as a government understand that mental health and addictions issues are impacting all of our communities, and downstream that includes our correctional facilities.
A lot of people are saying that there's a lot of people in jails that are simply there because they're drug addicts and they've committed criminal acts to get drugs. There was a line in the budget that said the government is going to be diverting low-risk individuals from coming into the justice system and reducing the frequency of offenders committing another crime. What does that mean?
Well, frankly, what it means is a joint initiative that the Attorney General and the Solicitor General's office are working on, and some pilot projects that are called Justice Centres, and they bring together all of the community agencies, including the justice sector, to make sure that people who don't need to be in jails because ultimately their first problem is an addictions or a mental health issue, get diverted and get the treatment and services they need. But I will say this is a community-wide, province-wide issue that we are seeing a rise in, which is why our government has made such a commitment to deal head-on with it. And it is multi-ministerial in approach. As you can imagine, Ministry of Health, Attorney General, Solicitor General, our education system, community services, they all need to work collectively to make sure that people who want to get the treatment get it when they need it.
Centers be up and running?
So I'm not going to pre-announce stuff, but I can assure you that we are actively engaged in it, and you will hear announcements soon.